Well, welcome everybody. For those who just joined, welcome to How to Rent Out Your Property in the Netherlands. We have our guest panelist, Arnold from Orange Tax, as he's actually, I really love it when you say tax is exciting. You make it feel exciting.
Now we love tax. So let's start talking tax and renting out your property.
Brilliant. So today on our part, we're going to, and also with Orange Tax, we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves and who, and Arnold will talk about a little bit about their service, our process, what renting and or selling, the different rules and regulations that you need to know as a landlord, the different types of contracts, and your responsibility, and what is the latest news. Orange Tax will talk about taxes to pay, their services. Box 3, which we always get, what happens when you're living abroad and you want to rent out your property, and obviously the latest news when it comes to taxes as well.
Exactly.
So a little bit about Expat Letting. We are actually, our sister company is Expat Housing. We helped with expats to find a home in the Netherlands. And then we also helped to buy a property. And then eventually, in the last few years, we started to be asked on whether or not they can let out their property. So we started Expat Letting. My name is Lilet. I should have introduced myself at the beginning as well. So do bear with me. I'm Australian. I moved here about 9 years ago. Unfortunately, my Dutch is terrible, so I do apologize. I look after the Amsterdam area. My colleague Diovana, who normally hosts this presentation, she's also a buying specialist. She looks after the South area, and Kimo, who started Expat Housing, he's the founder and CEO. We operate in most places in the Netherlands. As I mentioned, I look after the Amsterdam area, the Hague, and Diovana, she's in Rotterdam and Eindhoven. The service we provide, we have 2 services, tenancy placement or property management. We provide obviously free consultation. I can go more in depth in terms of exactly what our service is. So just a brief tenancy placement is obviously we come to your property, we do a price indication that entails also taking photographs and giving you advice while we visit your property and give you the best way to prepare your property for letting and to maximize, obviously, your rent. We promote it internally through Expat Housing as well, and other relocation companies that we work with, as well as Pararius. We conduct the viewings and obviously help you out with offers and contract setup and with the check-in. With the property management, we are the point of contact both for the tenant and for you as well, so you don't have to deal with anything. We manage everything from calamity management, quote requests, and any third-party assistance. And Orange Tax.
My name is Arnold Waal. I'm owner and founder of Orange Tax Services. We are focused on the non-Dutch national that needs to do their tax returns in the Netherlands. And right now we would like to help you with filing your tax return. Why do I do this work? Well, I'm good with numbers. I know about the Dutch tax system, but helping internationals with their numbers in the Dutch tax system, that is what keeps me going. That is what we do.
Sounds exciting.
It is.
So one of the things to think about when you are renting out your property are the different rules and regulations. So we're going to talk a little bit about property protection law, approval, where to get approval, what it means when we talk about regulated or deregulated, different permits that you need. So property protection law, this was introduced in April 2022, so it's actually fairly new. This is obviously to try to regulate the market a little bit, to have more housing available to first home buyers. This is to also encourage them to stay in their property longer. And what it means is, for example, in Amsterdam, when you buy a property after the 1st of April 2022, that is less than 533,000. These are actually the WOZ value of your property. So if you buy a property that's less than 533,000, after the 1st of April 2022, you will have to live in your property for at least 5 years before you can rent it out. And obviously, each municipality is different. We do advise all the time that do double check with each municipality the different rules and regulations, and it will stipulate there what the requirements for approval. As you all know, before you can actually rent out your property, you will have to have your mortgage provider permission. Sometimes it's not always the case. We do advise that, because obviously the risk, the bank finding out that you rented out your property without their permission, you could get a fine or you are made to pay your whole mortgage. Obviously, this is not our area. This is something that you need to discuss with your mortgage lender in terms of, what are the requirements. Sometimes they will approve your to rent out your home depending on the contract type that you have. And it will stipulate on the property that you buy in the deed, in the bylaws, it will say whether you can rent out your property or not. Sometimes you will have to have lived in your property for a period of time as well before the VVA gives you an approval to rent out your property, and sometimes not. And also it depends whether, if you have no mortgage, I think, in your property, then you can rent out your property. Regulated and deregulated. Now, this has actually been the main topic at the moment, and I think a lot of you are in this presentation because of this. Right now, it's only a proposal in terms of what the changes will be. But anyway, to discuss what regulated and deregulated means, the current points at the moment is at 149 points. This is obviously to figure out whether your property is on the regulated or deregulated, which means either you'll hear it as private sector or the social sector. Now, when your property is over 149 points, it is considered in the private sector and it's deregulated. That means there's no rent restriction on how much you can rent out your property. Now, if your property is less than 149 points, then it falls under the social sector and there is a maximum rent that you can charge. The points is awarded based on the size of your property, the WOZ value, the energy efficiency, luxury, which is how big is your counter space, how your toilet is installed, or the fixtures, having an outdoor space as a lot of points to your property. The WOZ value actually the whole value of it used to be the full value that goes towards the point. But because right now the WOZ value for certain areas are quite high, it only amounts 30% towards the total points. Now, I will obviously discuss a little bit further later on with at the end of the presentation about the possible changes of the regulations in terms of the points, that what it entails. A housing permit. Now, a lot of these regulations are obviously to try to regulate the market. So a housing permit, this is obviously to safeguard low-income individuals by regulating the property rentals. This is for the tenant to apply for, not you as a landlord, but it's good to, before you rent out your property, or when we rent out your property as well, we do advise the tenant that if they need to apply for a housing permit. So it's always good to know that if your tenant needs a housing permit or not. The criteria is different for each municipality. Again, we always advise that you check which municipality that you belong to. So for example, the biggest one that's different to Amsterdam is The Hague. So in The Hague, as I talked about with the points, and this is in The Hague City, that if your property is less than 185 points, the tenant needs a housing permit, and to obtain the permit, there is a salary requirement. So there's no rent restriction there, but it's more the fact that to qualify for it, they have to earn, for example, 66,000 for a single person, but for a couple, I think it's around 77,000, for example. And in Amsterdam, it's only for regulated properties up to 806 that the tenant requires a permit. So the sharing permit, this time you as a landlord or potential landlord will need to acquire this permit. And again, each municipality is different and they give out a certain amount of sharing permit depending on the neighborhood or street. And yeah, as I mentioned, each municipality is different. So it's for more than 2 people from different households. So if you've got 3 sharers that you want to rent out to, you will need to apply as a landlord to rent out your property or rooms to tenants. And obviously, to meet the criteria, you have to have fire safety in the property. There's more than 11 meters square per person, a communal space, the sound insulation, and each individual tenants have a contract. Again, you can book an appointment with us and we'll go through this whole thing with you again, and or check municipality for the different rules and regulations. Now, the different types of rental contract. Now, these are the 3 main ones. There are other ones, but these are the 3 most common ones. The most common one, obviously, or the most used, is A and B. So the indefinite contract, this has a minimum period. The minimum period could be 6 months, but generally it's about 12 months. And then after that, it becomes indefinite. The tenant can stay at your property for as long as they want. You can't get rid of your tenants. They will be the one to decide when to leave your property with 1 month calendar notice period. Sometimes a lot of landlords, the positive of this contract is you've got a guarantee of minimum period, let's say security of having a tenant at your property for 12 months. People like this because, it's that security, but tenants in this country are very well protected. So you can't just get rid of your tenants with this contract just because you don't like them, or, they do something that you don't like. There is certain process, which is normally quite a long process to get rid of your tenant, and that would involve going to court or filing a police report, etc., etc. At the moment, also the most popular one actually is the Model B contract. The only thing with this contract is the fact that the tenant throughout the rental period can terminate this contract with 1 month calendar notice period. You can't have a minimum period with this contract. So this is a temporary contract. You can have a maximum of 24 months, or you can have a Model B contract that's 12 months. But at the end of this contract, this contract cannot be extended. This will automatically become an A contract, automatically become indefinite. So if you do actually end up liking your tenant and you wish for them to stay, it will just roll over and become an A. So you don't have to do anything. But towards the end of a Model B contract, towards the end of the tenancy, even though it's finishing, let's say 24 months, you do have to give them a notice period at least 1 month before the end of the tenancy, or 2 months. Always one of the biggest advice that we have is have a really good relationship with your tenants. So it's easier to communicate with them, especially if you're going to choose an indefinite contract. You want someone to look after your property, but at the same time, you want to have a good relationship with them. The Model C contract, this is generally designed for landlords who wish to return back to their property, whether they end up getting a job overseas or, traveling for a year. And a lot of the times when you do get permission from the bank in terms of, keeping your mortgage in a similar format, they will only grant it in a Model C contract because it has a minimum and a maximum period. And then a lot of the times it cannot be extended. This is a flexible one. This contract can be extended. So let's say you're away for, 12 months. The minimum period can also be the same as the maximum period. So you can have a minimum of 12 months and a maximum of 12 months, or you can have a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 12 months. And then let's say towards the end of the tenancy, we always say maybe at least 3 months before the end, you give your tenant, if you wish to extend, so you can extend it the same period of time as well. So you can extend it for another 12 months with obviously the agreement with the tenant. You would just have to make an addendum to this contract, and it can be extended, and it can be extended up to 3 times. But this contract also differs to the other different contracts because this is the only one that has diplomatic clause where a landlord can have, let's say you end up returning back to your property, and when the minimum period is over, let's say the minimum period is 6 months and the contract is for 12 months, but the end of 6 months, you end up having to return because obviously regarding your job or you need to return. It's the only contract that allows a landlord to terminate the contract with a notice period after the minimum period. Taxes.
Okay, taxes. Yeah, the property tax is more your part. We do the income tax and the transfer tax. Oh, the transfer tax. The transfer tax, that is maybe interesting, Lilet? So if you buy a house, you pay 2% transfer tax if you're going to use it as your main residence. But if it is your first house and under a certain WOZ value, I don't know the exact amount, you can pay no transfer tax. But this webinar is about letting your house. So the house you buy is not for your personal use. Then the transfer tax is 10.4%. That's a huge amount. So people get creative and they say, well, what if I do as if I live in the house and after 2, 3, 4, 5 months, I decide to rent it anyway. Yeah, that is a problem. And the notary is in charge of collecting this transfer tax. He is hired by the king. He needs to do it correctly. So it will lead to issues. So don't do that. So please be correct. Then if you own a property in the Netherlands, you need to pay tax over the property in the Netherlands. So regardless where you are in the world, all the tax treaties state that properties in the Netherlands are taxed in the Netherlands. Then you can have the 30% ruling, which implies you don't need to report your worldwide assets. And the exception is property in the Netherlands. So you still report the property in the Netherlands. What do we tax? Yeah, we tax an assumed result. And why do we do that? The Dutch were too creative not to report the true rental income. So we have now the so-called WOZ value. That is a value set by the city. And based on that value, you pay the property tax, but also the income tax. And tax is, as we speak, 6.17% over the WOZ value. And right now, we tax that with 32% tax. If you have a loan on the property, you can deduct that, but not at 6.17%. No, at 2.28%. And the balance between those is taxed at 32% tax. We do not know capital gain tax. That's nice, but we have a hunger for money. So the proposal we learned last week is to increase the taxation from 32% to 36%. And but it's not final yet. Just like Lilet said at the start, we have some assumptions. It's not final yet, but I'm afraid it will become final. And maybe in the future we know capital gain tax, but right now we do not know capital gain tax. And that implies you do not report your rental income and you cannot deduct the costs. Oh, the box 3. Yeah. Well, actually, what I previously explained to you about the 6.17 assumed yield is box 3. We try to simplify the tax system by putting it in boxes with box 1, 2, and 3. In box 1, you report your worldwide employment income, your ZZP income, your freelance income. And the house that is your main residence in the Netherlands is also in box 1. It's deductible. In box 2, you report if you have more than 5% of a share capital in a company, you report the results related to that. And in box 3, you report your worldwide assets. Taxed are your assets minus your debts. If you are a Dutch tax resident, everything is taxed. Dutch bank accounts, foreign bank accounts, portfolios, not pension build-ups. If you hold the 30% ruling, then you don't need to report anything, but you are here at this webinar. So if you own a second property, so not your main property, that you do need to report in box 3. And if you are not in the Netherlands at all, you are a non-resident taxpayer, then you are a non-resident taxpayer for the property you own in the Netherlands. So if you hold a bank account, you cannot be a non-resident taxpayer. If you have a share capital in the Netherlands, you're not less than 5%. You're not a resident taxpayer. But if you own a property in the Netherlands, you are a non-resident taxpayer and you pay the identical amount of tax as a Dutch resident would pay over the value of the house. So you see already in that they are proposing to increase the percentage to 36%. And then you have something what I find very silly. If you are in a VVE, that means you are in an apartment building or you share an upper and a lower floor of a property, then you are obliged to be part of a so-called VVE. That is a combined owners organization that pay for the insurance for the building and that save up for the maintenance of the house. Annual maintenance, you have 5-year maintenance, like painting the wood, and sometimes you have to replace the roof, and that is 50, 60 years. And for that you save. You put money in that VVE. If you sell the house, you will not get the money back. If you go bankrupt, you will not get that money back. So you will not be able to touch that money ever again. And still, the Dutch tax office thinks it's your asset, and you have to pay tax over that in box 3. And the only less bad thing about this is that they no longer see it as an asset in box 3 that is subject to the 6.17% assumed yield, but it is in the 2023 taxation in the 0.01% assumed yield. Yeah, it's wonderful tax rates we have. And the rental income, you don't report. We assume you make 6.17% over the W asset value as a yield. Yeah, so you're relocating to another country, and you just mentioned that you need to have approval from your mortgage company to be able to rent out the property. And this is a hot topic. When we were in 2012 with the credit crisis, the mortgage companies were like, oh, we don't mind what you do as long as you pay the mortgage interest. But now we are out of the credit crisis and the banks are on top of their game. They make a lot of profit. They get cocky. So they are now on the lookout. They are more active to see if you are following the contract. Your contract, if it is a regular house you bought for using as for yourself, states that you cannot rent out the house. The reason is the interest was determined based on a risk profile, and you were the profile, your income, your family, and the house, and blah, blah, blah. But if you rent out the house, then somebody else is living in the house. They don't know that person, they don't know the income, so it's a higher risk. So they want to charge more interest from you. And if you are then moving away and renting out and not telling anybody, because all Dutch do that, then it can result in a problem. And the problem is that when the mortgage company knows or learns about it, you have to pay back the mortgage loan in 14 days' time. Otherwise, they will sell the property on an auction. You might think, I don't mind, it's a good market, but it's a different type of auction. It is a trader's auction where they cannot use mortgage loans. They have to pay cash. So the amounts are much less. So you get much less for your house. So you are left over with a personal debt. So don't go there. That's the point. Ask permission, get permission, and if you don't get permission, don't do it. Same with the VVE. Lilet said about the VVE, you need to have approval of the VVE to rent out your house. If you don't ask approval, your neighbors will tell the VVE. That's how it works. They will tell because you can't. Some people are very straight. What do I have more? Well, it's declaring the second home. Yeah, I think I fully touched this page. Was this, is there one more?
I think that's it. But I think we'll touch a little bit more later on about the current news. So how our process works, well, we try to make it more of an experience. And like as I mentioned, we are expats ourselves. We don't solely deal with expats. We do deal with Dutch as well, but we specialize obviously with expats, and we know the market on the other side in terms of what tenants are looking for, what their expectations. So we provide a lot of input from both sides of the market, and we try to make it a little bit more of an experience both for you as a landlord and for the tenants as well. We treat your home as if it's ours. So when we go do the intake and come to your property, we make sure that we ask you in terms of what kind of tenants you're looking for, your criteria, whether your expectations, also managing it, whether it's feasible or not, but obviously just trying to find the right fit, the right candidate for your property that would look after your property the way that you obviously look after yours. And our pricing is transparent. We have fixed price, so we don't have any hidden fees. And as I mentioned earlier, we work with a large network. So we also advertise your property through our sister company, Expat Housing, which we work with a lot of companies, and also we work with a lot of relocation companies as well. So we advertise through that, and we advertise through, as I mentioned, per areas. We obviously will provide continuous support. Even if you don't choose property management, we provide the service. If you ever need any help or advice with anything, we will provide a continuous support. So as I mentioned, we also, as well as AArnold, we do complimentary consultation. So you can come, we can come to your property and give you advice, and obviously how to best prepare your property and have a better idea. We talk about in terms of the type of tenant that you're looking for, your criteria. We give you a price indication in terms of what the difference between rent out your property furnished or unfurnished, and obviously what your property value in the area for rental. During the intake, we will take pictures and then create a brochure and listing, and then list it online. In terms of the viewings, as I discussed during the intake, we know in terms of your criteria, we work a little bit differently to other real estate agency. I like to screen, not invite hundreds of people to the property if they don't fit the criteria that you're looking for. I think it's always nice to, if you're looking for a single or couple in your property with no pets, we screen them before, there's no point having them in your property. We try to sort of manage that way beforehand. Once you have your selected candidate, we will screen them, check their documentation, their contracts, and then once that is all checks out, we will prepare the contract and send you a draft of the contract and make sure that you're happy with all the details, and then send it to the chosen candidate. And we will obviously, the reason we don't invite everybody to the viewings as well is I like to have a gauge, not necessarily tell you which candidate is better, because the decision is yours at the end of the day, but I can provide you a better feedback on each individual that has come to see your property. Especially if you're a first-time landlord, this is always a nice thing to have, that have a little bit of idea in terms of the tenants that you have chosen, not just obviously the buyer that they sent you. And in terms of the different contracts, we can talk you through it and obviously send you the draft. And then we do the whole check-in and inventory report of your property. We'll manage all of that. And then with property management, we are the first point of contact for the tenant. You don't ever have to deal with your tenant. We obviously make sure that they pay their rent on time. So we manage the finance side of it as well. And then obviously if there is a fault with the property, if there's needing repairs, we manage all of that. So you don't have to deal with it. Actually, during the check-in, I always talk through, especially with a lot of expats, they don't know what their responsibilities are as a tenant. So this is where we also are beneficial in terms of, because we know what tenants don't know in terms of the rules and regulations or maintenance and laws in the Netherlands. So we do try to make the selected tenants aware of this information. Our pricing, so as I mentioned, we provide tenancy placement and property management. We have fixed fee. Most agencies, they charge 1 month rent, but ours, we still provide the exact same service, probably better because, we try to be a little bit more personable. And as I mentioned, we'll do an intake, photograph your property, list it, promotion, and obviously conduct the viewings. We also make sure that we coordinate the times that we will conduct the viewings with you and make sure that it's the right time. And as I mentioned, we do the tenant screening, the contract setup, the check-in report, and inspection report, and then a 2-week post-check-in support, both for you and for the tenant. And as I mentioned, the property management, it's 5% of the rent. And then both these prices obviously are excluding VAT.
Yeah, we are very simple. We have one fixed fee of €430 for 3 zero, including VAT, including your tax partner. And that is what we charge for filing your income tax return. We can also do payroll, but that's a bit complex to now state what is the fee. You can go to our website. Oh, you see the website. And we are as transparent as we try with our fees. So you find all our fees there already. As
AArnold said, they do have other services. I only put the ones that relevant to this presentation, but all the pricing is on their website. So the listings there as well. And there's a QR code at the end, which you can use, takes you directly to their website. So the latest news, the market is changing. And we got this information through Pararius as well. So this is their data. So the drop in properties that are available dropped to 21% in 2022 and then 23% in 2023. And then, yeah, because of the new changes and new regulations that's being introduced, again, it's still a proposal, but it's going to even create even bigger drop in 2024. The overbidding, I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the rental market at the moment. Obviously, with all the new proposals that they're trying to introduce, because of the issues that's happening at the moment, especially with the increase, as you can see, with a lot of overbidding of properties, because there's not a lot of properties available compared to the people that's looking for properties, especially, in Amsterdam. It's to try to sort of help those middle income and low income, not to push them out of the rental market and to have sort of availability for properties as well. I think there's a lot of pros and cons with a lot of the things that they're proposing. Yeah, so the viewing requests is crazy, depending on the size of your property as well. Any properties that's generally a 1 to 2 bedroom, we found that in 2 days, I have listed properties. In 5 hours, the minute that I list it, we have 200 requests, and I actually have to take down the property, especially the properties that are between 1,800 to 2,000. These are the high demand properties. Now, obviously, the bigger the properties, the higher the rent, it becomes less competitive, but the most competitive is the 1 to 2 bedrooms. Now, this is the last update was in August. This is just to give you what the rental market looks like at the moment. So we've got, in terms of divided it into furnished and unfurnished, and obviously the size of your property. At the moment, as I mentioned, for 1 bedroom, for a furnished, it's 2,000, and unfurnished, this is in Amsterdam. I'm not going to go through all the, because you guys can see the presentation, the price difference between the two. Sometimes with the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, in the price range of 2,000 and the 1,850, this is where the overbidding happens. And because there's not a lot of them available, people tend to bid over the asking price. Now, it obviously depends on the properties. But when you do book a consultation with us, so we can talk you through like your property and give you advice, give you a better price indication, and in terms of what it would look like when you do list your property. And obviously what's happening in the news at the moment, the occupancy obligation, which is what we discussed earlier, the property protection law, they introduced that to obviously encourage first home buyers to stay in their home longer than they should before renting it out. And the proposal is that, going back to rental contracts, the proposal of getting rid of temporary contract, which has been in the news, and we get a lot of questions about it. This is still a proposal. We don't know whether they will introduce it or not. I think a lot of the issues is because a lot of landlords will choose a temporary rental contract, let's say the 2 years, but because the spike of the increase of the rental prices, they will rent out their property with one tenant for like 2 years, and then they want to rent it out to a new person because they want to be able to increase their rent. So that's kind of why they're trying to introduce that as well, because obviously to try to regulate the market a little bit. And as the discussion earlier with the point system, as I mentioned, and I know a lot of people asking about this. So now it's at currently 147 points. It's going to go up to 187 in 2024. We don't know exactly when. Now, this proposal falls under non-controversial. So even though we don't have a government, but it falls under non-controversial. So apparently it is looking like it's going to go through, but we just don't know exactly when. But what it entails is there is going to be a rent restriction. They're trying to create a mid-market, a mid-sector. So we have the free sector and the social sector. They're trying to create a mid-sector. So if your property falls under 187 points or less, then there is a rent restriction in terms of how much you can rent out your property. We don't know how much it will be. We don't know what it means, but that's kind of what the proposal is, that there will be a rent restriction, not as low as this social sector, but obviously we don't know exactly what that means yet. The upcoming taxation method in box 3, this is you.
Yeah. Hey, Lilet, do you know we have elections coming up? On the 22nd of November, we have elections. And the very last day our current parliament, before the elections came together, was the 26th of October last. It was a Thursday. A Thursday I will remember me very vividly, because first they had dinner, I think, I can only assume with a lot of alcohol. And then after that, they were going to vote about the new tax laws in 2024. And they increased the box 3 taxation, and they reduced significantly the 30% ruling. The 30% ruling, I don't know if everybody knows the ruling, but in the past, we tried to attract people with knowledge from abroad, and nobody wanted to come to the Netherlands because we had a 72% tax rate. Can you imagine that, Lilet? 72% tax rate. It's now 49.5, but still, it was a lot. So the Dutch government introduced a 35% tax rule. That means 35% of your salary is not taxed, and 65% of the salary is taxed. And then the Dutch government asked the knowledgeable people from abroad, are you coming to the Netherlands? And they said, no, of course not, because you also tax your worldwide assets. Okay. What if we do not tax your worldwide assets and we give you a 35% discount? Will you come to the Netherlands? No, of course not. Why not? Your driver's license test is ridiculously complex. Okay, we give you a driver's license. Will you come? Well, then they come. So the people in parliament have no idea about the Dutch tax rules. They only know how to spend the money. So they have reduced the 35% ruling to 30% ruling. It was valid for a 12-year period, 10-year period, 8, now 5-year period. And last Thursday, they came up with something new, and that is the 30% ruling is no longer a 30% ruling. It is for 5 years. It is 5 years is 60 months. So it will now be a 30% ruling for 20 months, a 20% ruling for 20 months, and a 10% ruling for 20 months. I don't think a lot of knowledgeable people will come to the Netherlands again. And the people that already have the 30% ruling will be confronted with this new rule on January 1. But there will be an in-between regulation, but nobody knows what that will contain. I mean, how can you think of that 2 months before the change of the year? But they did. It is not final yet, but the other people that need to vote have as much knowledge about the taxation as the first people that invented it. So I think it will be accepted. So the 30% ruling will go down. And part of the fun of the 30% ruling is also that you do not need to report your worldwide assets. Well, they also voted to abandon that as per the year 2026. And another fun part of the 30% ruling is that if you hold more than 5% share capital in a company somewhere in the world, not in the Netherlands, and you receive a dividend, you don't need to disclose the dividend with the Dutch tax office, and that is going to disappear as well. So, yeah, we think tax is exciting, but the Dutch government is doing their best to make it less exciting. That are the changes for the 30% ruling. And the box 3 aspects I already discussed. They will increase the tax rate from 32% to 36%. So that is it for the news.
Now we move to the questions. Yeah? Okay, perfect. I have one for Arnold. After how long are you allowed to rent out your primary residence without paying the transfer tax back? So I believe they are referring to the 2% that don't become a 10.6%. I think that's what they're referring. I hope is that what they're referring. It's from the anonymous attendee, so I don't have a name. But if you are the one who wrote that question, I hope that's what you mean.
Yeah, it is a notary question. First of all, they are collecting the tax and they are liable for the tax. But if you buy the house with the intention to have it your main residence, you do everything to have it your main residence, but something in life makes it that you no longer want to use it as your main residence and rent it out, that is a moment if you can defend that you did not purchase it with the intention to pay a low transfer tax and then sneakily later on rent it out. If you can prove that, then I think you can come to terms with the Dutch tax office. But between 6 months and a year. If you in that period convert the usage to a rental property, you have issues. So after a year, maybe, but I cannot give guarantees. It is very, there is no line. It is gray. So I cannot give a solid answer.
Yes, thank you. But I had a transfer. I'm also a buying agent, so I had a transfer with a client a few weeks ago, and they had the same question at the notary, and the notary that we went did say to them about 6 months, otherwise they would have to pay 10%,
Okay.
10.4. Just
notary knows best.
Yes, notary knows best, but that was one notary. I know there is some changes here and there, so you have to ask that to the notary you go. But thank you for that. Another anonymous attendee for you, Arnold. Can you please explain the property tax again? And it is applicable to both my primary house and the rental property, or only to the rental property? So this is where the question gets a little bit more specific. So I would ask you, Arnold, if you can just make a little big answer that everyone more or less understands, because we can go really deep on everyone's.
Yeah, but I already also saw the chat a similar question. So you mentioned your primary house and a rental property. Your primary house I see as the house where you are living in with your family, where you're not going to rent it out, not even a room. For that mortgage, you have a mortgage deduction in box 1, and that is not part of this story. It is the rental property. And I got my calculated. Let's say you have a 100,000 euro WOZ value property. Then the Dutch government assumes you make 6.17, not 70, but 17% yield. That is 6,170 euros. And over that, in 2023, you pay 32% tax, and that is 1,974 euros tax. Over 12 months, per month is 164 euros tax. Okay, but now you have a 100,000 euro property, WOZ property, and you took out a 100,000 euro debt. So the 6,170 remains standing, but the debt you can deduct at 2.28%. That is 2,280 euros. And then over the difference between what the assumed yield is and the cost, that is 38.90, you pay 32% tax, so you pay 1,200 euros. 1,244 euros tax, so 100 euros per month. That is for a 100,000 euro WOZ building. And if you have a 300,000 euro building or 400,000 euro building, you multiply it by 3 or 4, and then you have a good indication. We do have a tax-free amount in box 3 of 57,000 euros per tax partner. And that I did not take into account because that is also consumed by your bank balances and other things. So I just go for the tax calculation. But if it is only a property you own, then you can deduct, if you own it yourself, 57,000 euros from the total. And if you have a tax partner with whom you own the property, it's 114,000 euros. Are you still awake, Diovana?
Yes, I was just on mute myself. Thank you for the answer.
We can make calculations, example calculations separately.
Perfect. For you, Lilet, when the landlord gets a sharing permit for more than 2 tenants, you said that each tenant gets an individual contract. Are you referring to the Kamerverhuur system, or is a different way of renting that doesn't have to pay attention to the points system under Kamerverhuur?
No, it's just you still have to qualify in the points system, because obviously if your property is less than the 147 points, I don't think that you would have enough rooms, because normally if the property is less than 147 points, your property is quite small. Or
not even allowed for a sharer.
Yeah, it's not even allowed for a sharer. So like I said, you have to have 11 meters communal space for the property. It has to qualify in terms of, certain criteria like the energy, sound insulation. So if it falls under the 147 points, it's already not valid for a sharing permit.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Lilet, the 2 contracts, just from a practical point of view, each tenant needs to show the city where they register a contract that they are allowed to live in the property, not?
Yes, and the reason you have different contracts, because obviously sometimes with a sharing permit, obviously that one tenant breaks their contract or they leave, so it doesn't affect the existing contract. So they will have to obviously just get another tenant with, you know, the similar contract. It's just a different, it's an individual contract for each person. And that's for two people from different households. Now, no matter what, each person that rents out your property or anyone that resides on any property has to be registered to that property. We do get a lot of questions that, you know, can I rent out my property and not have it a person registering there? Everyone needs to register at the property. Obviously, that's how the municipality can.
And actually, that's a sneaky question, Lilet. Is it obliged to register a person? Because that person that is asking you is actually deducting the property probably in box 1, and they cannot have another person registering there because then it shows you cannot deduct it.
Yeah, and I mean, we get this question a lot, but we also give you sort of obviously what the risks are, and people obviously do it, but it's none of our business. But we give you, just like with your mortgage, but we do advise obviously what the risks are. And I know with a lot of expats, they need to be registered at that address because they need it for employment, tax purposes, everything, you know. So it's probably one of the main things that you do. And also, if you do stay registered at your property, it will change the municipality tax for that property. So it will say that there's 2 people residing or 5 people residing in that. And so the municipality tax is different. It's counted on 5 people as opposed to only 2 people that technically lives in that property. So that affects it as well. And obviously your tenant has to be aware or has to be notified that you're staying registered at the property if you do choose to.
Perfect. Considering the WOZ value has been capped to 30% of the total number of the points of a rental home, how many points more do you need in total to stay over the 187 points required for an unregulated rental? Yeah, that's a hard one to answer without seeing the property though. We need to see how much of those 30% will count as a point for the property, and then how much more points you need based on your property itself. So we can't tell you how much more you need because without seeing the property. If it's a property that has a very luxury kitchen, a very luxury bathroom and those kind of things, it will add and add and add. If you have a nice balcony, double glazed windows, a good NH label, so it doesn't count that much. But if you don't have all those things, it counts even less. So we can't really tell you without seeing the property though. Yeah, but we will share the link after together with the presentation, and then you can calculate those points yourself answering the questions.
You need to have your WOZ value and then the floor plan of your property so that you know the exact measurements of each room, because it will ask you the different and fitting.
I have here multiple questions. Any tips while asking permission from the bank to rent it out your property? Yeah. I can give some tips. Arnold, you can also give some tips about what the bank needs to give them permission to rent it out the property when they have a buy to live instead of a buy to let mortgage.
Yeah, I think you have to go to a mortgage specialist because a new application needs to be made. There's a new risk.
Yeah, indeed. And there is a lot of risk, and it will come in your mortgage deed that you are not allowed to rent it out anyway. That will be in your mortgage deed. So you do have to talk to your mortgage advisor about it. And your bank, there are exceptions that the bank might make for you. For example, if you go to a sabbatic for 9 months, which means that you have a time to go and a time to get back to the country again, the bank might give you permission to rent it out for that period only without changing anything on your mortgage. If you have an assignment abroad for 6, 7, 8 a year, for example, also means that you have a contract with a company that it will end and you come back to the Netherlands. Just an example. The bank might give you a permission. So every situation is different. You always have to try. But those are the tips. Yeah, that's all the tips.
Yeah, but
I think what Arnold said, the bank always based it on the risk factor. And like I mentioned earlier, as an example, my client, she just had to show the mortgage advisor the contract that she entered in to rent out her property. And it was a 12-month contract that cannot be extended. They want to see also that the money goes straight to you. So they need to like proof of everything, like all the little details that, you know, there is security. Yeah. It's all about the risks. And if it has high risk, they won't let you keep your buy to live.
The core business of a bank is saying no. So I prefer you go to a mortgage consultant instead of going to your bank, because once they say no, they will not change their opinion. And the mortgage consultant can maybe smoothen the deal, bring it better, do a better offer.
Actually, that's a really good advice, because we don't actually, you're right, to go with a mortgage lender first, because the bank, like you said, will say no. And I think they'll be able to calculate, overlook at your financial situation.
Yeah.
Like that.
There were some major changes expected, which made renting out not worth it anymore. Is this the same 32 to 30% change as mentioned in the presentation?
Yeah, but I don't want to go as far as that it is not worth renting it out anymore. But indeed, it is going to the 36% taxation. Indeed, yeah.
Perfect. Do you help in an early evaluation of the house on a possible rental income? Yes, we do. We let you know more or less how much you can get as a rental for your property, and helps in deciding if it's worth going for another property. Yeah, that part I understand. If you're thinking about buying something, then we can help you with telling you how much more or less you can get as a rent for that property. That's what I understood. But those are different things. So we can, if you have a property already, of course, we can help you out and tell you how much more or less the rent will be. But deciding if it's worth it going for another house, that's the part that you need. If you're buying something, we don't do that as a letting. No, then you already have to have a property, so we can let it out for you. But if you need help buying a property, that's something then, that's also something that I do, for example. Then we help you to buy a property, and then we can let you know more or less for how much you can rent it out. Yeah, definitely. But of course, there are rules and regulations for that, to rent it out your property when you're buying a property as well. Just be
I was about to say, bear in mind what we discussed with the property protection law, that depending on which city, if it's under a certain amount, then you can't rent it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and deciding is investment advice, and we are not allowed to give investment advice.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we're purely, well, on our side, it's letting. Well, my side specifically, it's letting, Diovana buying, and AArnold tax.
Tax.
There you go. There you go. Let me see here. What are the list of costs I should expect when changing my property to be an owner-occupier to buy to let, both one-off and ongoing costs? So what are the list of costs? You mean the costs to changing your mortgage, or costs of renting out a property? You do have to prepare the property for renting out, of course. You have to decide if you want to rent it out, furnished, unfurnished. There is regulations about that the property has to be in a certain state to be able to rent it out, to be able to be rented out, of course. All the safety parts that have to be there. So those are the costs if the house doesn't have yet, that you're going to have to pay for it, of course. Let it ready for the tenant. Costs regarding a mortgage, that you have to talk to your mortgage advisor to see the difference, how much you're going to pay. One of the things that you need to realize, if you are doing a buy-to-let mortgage, you can only finance 70% of the purchase price, and you have to pay 10.4% as a transfer taxes. There is no exception, doesn't matter how old you are, how is your first property or not. So there is no exception on that one. So that's what we understood. So that's the answer. And I do have one question that I wanted to ask you, AArnold. There's someone here asked about the parent donation to be able to buy a property and then rent it out. So if your parents live abroad, they don't pay taxes in the Netherlands. They can donate as much as they can, and you don't pay, nobody pays any taxes, unless you pay in the home country, of course, but that's something else.
That's all true. If your parents have never been in the Netherlands, it is not taxed in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
If your parents have been Dutch nationals, they should have left the Netherlands more than 10 years. Yeah. And if your parents have lived in the Netherlands, they should have left at least a year. And then they can give the donation free of Dutch gift tax. Yeah. However, the notary has an obligation to check if the money was not a source of money laundering or terrorism. Yeah. So the notary loves that very much. When your parents make a bank transfer to your bank account, then the bank has already done some checks and balances, but then you need to inform the notary where the money is coming from. And the buyer determines the notary. So if you know where you're going to buy and who will be your notary, then before you actually start the process of buying, visit that notary already and ask, what do you need from me to prove the money is legit? And then you can meet in 6 weeks time, Diovana, the 6 weeks time to transfer the house. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, there's plenty of documents that you have your parents and you're gonna have to fill in if you get the money from abroad. I have many clients that do that. Of course, you have to prove that it's not laundry money, drugs money, whatever. That is not a legal money. You have to prove to the notary, to the country that is not illegal. Yeah, that's one of the things. But the question is, can they do that twice or just once for the first property, for example? If they want to buy a second property, can the parents donate again without paying any taxes?
We love the color of green. It is the other countries' regulations that apply. So the parents, they can give as much as they like.
For as many properties as they want. Okay, perfect. That's your answer. So yeah, thank you so much. That was the question. Is there any other questions here, Arnold, that you want to answer that is very important for everyone to know about taxes?
No, I have not been able to scroll down through all but I hope I get in my email box from you the questions that are tax related. But I think the most important topics we addressed it is box 3, and it is tax, and you have the transfer tax, and and we love to file your tax return. Should you live abroad and you have a property in the Netherlands, you are supposed to file a tax return, and you probably are invited to file the tax return, and we file the tax return for a fixed fee. So happy to help you.
So just follow the QR code just there, which will take you to Arnold's website. And thank you for joining us.
I'm reading the other questions. A lot of questions here that are left behind. They are actually very, very personal towards your own situation at the moment. So yeah, please send Arnold an email. If you have anything related to letting or buying, you can send it to us. And if you can't find Arnold emails or something like that, send it to us. We will copy him for sure. But you will receive this presentation. You will receive the recording and also all the links that are necessary for your taxes, for the letting part as well. So Arnold, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part.
Of course. Lilet, thank you very much for starting everything. I'm sorry I was a bit late, everyone. Yeah, but we did it. So I wish everyone a very nice weekend. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.